Fiber optics, thin, hair-like fibers of pure glass, by themselves completely insignificant. In terms of what they can accomplish, absolutely staggering. For the first time, developments like fiber optics and microelectronics have brought the world of tomorrow to our doorstep. Today, technologies like fiber optics and the chip have brought us to the threshold of an electronic information age. My name is Jack Nellist. As life becomes more complex, we must communicate more and we must communicate better. The old ways just won't do. We must find new communication highways. Now, we've had an information age since Gutenberg invented the printing press. But that was a paper information age. Probably the first attempt to communicate using electricity over a long distance was the Morse code. The Morse code made use of the first primitive digits. There were only two, a dot and a dash. Then around 1880, Alexander Graham Bell brought us the telephone. For the first time, actual voice sounds could be heard over long distance, and no special skills were required to operate the telephone. Telephone transmission was in an analog mode. In other words, different sounds were given different electrical wavelengths. If you could see them, they would look like slow, wave-like motions. Over the next 80 years, telephone technology evolved very slowly. There were some advancements. We moved from the manual switchboard to the electromechanical switch and the dial telephone, but basically everything remained in an analog mode. But then in the 1960s, we had a virtual explosion of new inventions. The first workable computer, the first lasers, and the first silicon chips. By the 1970s, we saw a proliferation of computers. Very often, fiber optics will carry the information generated by these computers. It's important to keep in mind that all these new technologies speak in one common language, digits. Voice and sound, pictures and data can all be given a numeric value which computers understand. Well, what's all this mean? We all know that computers are cheaper and faster than manpower, and in some cases more efficient. And the cost of computers are coming down at an incredible rate. For instance, a computer that cost $30,000 in 1960 could be duplicated on this chip today for $10. This is the equivalent of buying a Rolls-Royce for $1 in a few years' time. And of course, when we talk about today's computers, we're really talking about the silicon chip, which is at the heart of every microprocessor, computer, and robot. Today we find the silicon chip and microprocessor almost everywhere. Of course, the point of the story is fiber optics often go hand in hand with computers, and the use of fiber optics will increase as computers become more common. Telephone networks couldn't ignore chips and computers either. We were affected by the new technologies faster than any other industry. Transmission systems in the BCTEL network were primarily analog until 1968, when the first digital transmission system was introduced. To become part of the digital network, fiber systems must interface at the same North American digital transmission rates. Most fiber systems today operate at the rate of 45 million bits per second, which means that each pair of fibers can carry 672 voice circuits. It wasn't until 1960 that it was realized that two unrelated technologies, semiconductors and optical waveguides, could be combined into a superior transmission system, fiber optics. In 1962, solid-state technology produced the laser. It's very small, about the size of a grain of sand, and it's very powerful. The photodiode was developed in the 1960s to detect light signals and turn them back into electrical signals. And then in 1970, Corning Glass produced a glass fiber of sufficient purity that it had a loss of less than 20 dB per kilometer. The fiber optic transmission system was born. As I said earlier, all these technologies speak a digital language, but people don't talk in digits. How do we translate voice into digits, into a series of on and off pulses, and then make it sound like a voice again at the other end? And how do we pack many conversations onto one line? With analog, your message or telephone call is transmitted by electrical waves, similar to the sound waves carried through the air. In digital systems, voice and other sounds are sampled and translated into numerical codes before they are transmitted to their destinations. The codes take the form of a continuous stream of on and off pulses in varying sequences. These pulses are known as bits. They are grouped and coded with a number, mixed with many other grouped and coded messages, and transmitted over the network at high speed. Hundreds of separate signals can be carried simultaneously. At the receiving end, the codes are translated back into the original voice or other signals. BCTEL became involved in fiber optics back in 1978. In March of 1979, we turned up our first field trial between the Hemlock Central Office in Vancouver and the Cypress Central Office in Burnaby, a distance of 7.4 kilometers. At the time of turn-up, this was the longest system in the world operating without an intermediate repeater. The system operated for a year and a half with virtually no problems.
Okay, no problem.
The trial was a success, and we proceeded with our first operational system. Our digital link from the microwave tower at Smith Hill on Vancouver Island to our Victoria toll office was turned up in September 1981. This is part of a larger system which provides the first digital radio link to Vancouver Island. BCTEL is in the process of replacing all analog radio systems in the province with digital radio, which is completely compatible with fiber optic technology. Our next major system is a digital link from New Westminster to Vancouver, a distance of 27 kilometers. Vancouver will be the western terminal of two digital links across Canada, both terminating in a digital switch in downtown Vancouver. The first will be a digital radio extended from New Westminster to Vancouver on fiber optics, and the other system will be a digital satellite system terminating on this dish on the roof of our downtown switching center. The satellite will be placed in orbit by the Space Shuttle in 1982. Let's look at an interesting comparison. This cable was used on our first field trial. It contains 2 fibers and can carry 672 circuits. This cable was used on our first 2 operational systems. It contains 12 fibers and will carry over 4,000 circuits. This cable contains 36 fibers and can carry over 12,000 circuits. Now, if we take this one step further and increase the bit rate from 45 megabits per second to 274 megabits per second, this cable can then carry over 72,000 circuits. Now let's take a look at a typical installation. Traditional copper cables are being replaced by fiber optic cables. I could lift about 50 meters of this fiber optics cable, but the copper cable, no way. The copper runs about $81 a meter, whereas the fiber optics is about $12 a meter. Obviously, the fiber optics is cheaper, lighter, and easier to use. Now, what advantages does fiber optics offer our industry and our customers? Well, for one thing, it has very little loss, so the transmission performance is improved. It has a very large bandwidth, so we can carry TV, data, and plain old telephone service. There's no interference, so there's no hum, noise, or crosstalk, and there's no shock hazard. And last but not least, the cables are very small and light. The last item is extremely important to BC-Tel because the underground conduit system is the most expensive item in our outside plant construction. As a result, every effort is made to maximize the use of the existing conduit system. Fiber optics provides an excellent opportunity to maximize the use of conduit. The method that BC-Tel has adopted involves placing 4 of these 1-inch plastic tubes in a standard 4-inch conduit. These tubes are called subducts. The method makes the initial installation of cable easier and permits 3 additional cables to be placed at a future date. Hopefully, in the near future, we can mine all the existing copper under the street and release additional duct space for the fiber. There is very little difference between installing fiber optic cables and copper cables.
Here we go. Not easy.
Fiber optic cables can be pulled into underground conduits using conventional techniques and equipment. In fact, fiber cable is generally easier and quicker to install than copper cable because it's lighter and requires fewer splices. Fiber cable in lengths of 1 kilometer are being placed in this manner. Splicing copper pairs is very time-consuming because there are literally thousands of wires to splice. With fiber optics, we only have a few fibers to splice, and we have a machine that helps us make a perfect splice. Come, I'll show you. Splicing of optical fiber has now progressed to the point where it is practically fail-safe. The ends are inscribed and cleaved cleanly across, much as you would do in cutting any glass. It's very important to have absolutely smooth, squared-off ends. The 2 glass ends must first be cleaned of their coating and any particles of dust or dirt. Then the 2 ends are fused together by the electric arc of a tiny fusion welder. The splicing process itself is viewed either under a microscope or a new fusion welder, which has its own viewing screen. The last step is to place a splice pack around the weld to provide physical protection, and the operation is complete. If there's a problem anywhere along the line, we can spot the trouble by using a machine. This is called an optical time domain reflectometer, and it's a very essential piece of equipment during the installation and maintenance of fiber optic cables. The OTDR is basically a closed-circuit optical radar. It operates by periodically launching narrow laser pulses into the fiber and monitors the reflected light with respect to time. Its range is about 6 kilometers. If there's a poor splice, a fault, or a break in the fiber, it will show up on the screen. Now let's look into the future. Existing fiber optic systems can operate up to 12 kilometers without repeaters. Much work is still to be done to develop transmitters that operate at the longer wavelengths. Soon we can increase the repeater spacing from 12 to 25 kilometers, and then eventually from 30 to 40 kilometers. Fiber optic technology is moving toward long wavelengths. Long wavelengths plus single-mode fibers will provide the very long repeater spacings that we need for transcontinental systems and transoceanic submarine systems. Finally, a technique called wavelength division multiplexing is still under development. Eventually, better use will be made of the single fiber by increasing its information carrying capacity. Quite simply, two-way conversations, two-way transmission of sound or data will be transmitted over a single strand of glass. The home of tomorrow will require a single integrated communications network to provide broadband video, personal computers, security devices, and telephone service. It's conceivable that in this decade we will use computers and related technologies to bank from home, shop from home, and even work from home. Our society will require communication superhighways. At that time, it'll be comforting to know that the glass network is in place to carry it all.